The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show.
Today is Thursday, June 17th, 2021. Thanks so much for joining us. We are keeping our eye on all of the different patterns that we see across this country, state to state, city to city, whether you're from the Southeast or the Northwest. We have seen how systems have been affecting the lives of Black people and poor people across this country. We have so much to discuss this morning in terms of how not only systems are hurting us, but also how our leaders are refusing to actually take the steps necessary to do what is necessary to help us push this country forward. So many things that we're going to cover this morning. But first, we begin our morning, as always, with On the Clock with Georgia Ford.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. We have some news that feels like a bit of a step forward. The House has approved a Senate-passed bill making Juneteenth a federal holiday. Now, this is going to commemorate June 19th, the day when slaves in southern states learned that they were actually free. It feels like something that is long overdue, something that should have happened a long time ago. I mean, we have been celebrating Independence Day since I believe 1870 is when Congress passed that as a federal holiday. So it feels like this is something that should have happened a long time ago. I want you guys to take a listen to Representative Carolyn Maloney, who spoke about the importance of this bill on the House floor. Take a listen.
First known as Jubilee Day, Juneteenth is marked by food, music, fellowship. These celebrations honor freedom, recognize life, and uplift the complex history and the beautiful culture of the African American community. 47 states and the District of Columbia have made Juneteenth a public holiday, including my own state of New York. While millions of Americans have celebrated this important day for generations, the federal government has failed in its responsibility to recognize its significance. Today, we can change that. It is often said that those who do not remember their past are doomed to repeat it. If we want to confront the sins of slavery and move forward towards a more equitable, fair, and free society, it is incumbent upon us to recognize not only our past evils, but the moments of triumph over those evils. Making Juneteenth a federal holiday is a crucial step in remembering our past, and it will undoubtedly help us build a better future.
Now, there is one more step. So it's been passed, but the president does have to sign the bill, making it a law. So at that point, I want to bring in our guest, Sam Simmons. He is a radio talk show host. Sam, do you think President Joe Biden is going to sign this bill?
Oh, I believe so. At this point, he better, but I believe he will.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Well, you know how I am. But the thing is it interesting how far our country will go to hide our history, our full history, right? And the thing is we know how perpetrators who do wrongs to folks are always ready to talk about what they didn't do or what didn't happen. But we're finding out more and more for folks who didn't know how many things they have hid from us. Several weeks ago, we were having a lot of conversations about Tulsa and Black, our Black Wall Street. And we know that there's like 28 other massacres that we know of. And there were more than 28, but 28 notable ones around the country. And so, and then Juneteenth, there was some more information around Juneteenth after George Floyd's killing here in Minneapolis. All of a sudden we want to know stuff about us, but that's still at the same time, we got states fighting having our history in schools as this like like it's gonna uh, you know, turn all the little kids into, we don't want them to feel bad, that privilege of comfort. We've been uncomfortable, especially if we, since we've been here, especially if you got slavery in your background, you've been uncomfortable from the day you walked off that ship, and in spite of that uncomfort, we still here, and we're still trying to make changes that probably should have been, like you were saying with Juneteenth, as the representative was talking about what took it so long, right? And like I mentioned about the many different massacres in the United cities, what a lot of people don't know is several of those massacres happened 1 year after World War One, after Black men who fought in this war came back and said, "You are no longer going to treat me less than a man," and had the audacity to stand up for themselves. Because even with Tulsa, we're talking about veterans who were standing up for themselves, and they wanted to blame the massacre on them. So how you get me started. I can go on for a minute, but it's just the ironic part that we have to lose our lives for our country to pay attention, right? Because it's like when George Floyd happened here in Minneapolis, of that murder. I'm an old man, as you can see. I used to have black hair before COVID, and I went in the basement. So but the thing is that when that happened, I suffered, with many people of color suffered what we call that, that racial trauma, that trauma that is experience that we share with somebody of our race, or somebody of your race or your culture is killed, and you feel that, we feel that, it's like the young lady that witnesses talking about when she's seen that, Darnella, she's seen her father, her uncle, and that kind of thing. So, but for me, is being older Black man, I started thinking, so all of those insults I received over these years, where police have, stopped me, and I asked them, why you stopping me? And they came up with some bogus reason, or insulted me in front of my grandkids, and then gonna have the audacity to tell me to have a nice day. Do you think when we add up those scars, right? We add up those scars, I might not show them on my face, but there's many, you got the scars coming from all different directions. And I'm considered an upstanding citizen, right? And that's the thing about the Black community. Even when we do the right thing, it's not enough. And
to your point about adding up those scars, it seems like the acknowledgement of a federal holiday is just the bare minimum. I want to bring in Ben on this, because Ben, I know you really follow closely the political side, but not everybody was in support of passing this bill.
Yeah, Ron Johnson found himself on the wrong side of history yet again, and this is something the Republicans have a really good knack for, standing against the simplest of things. This is. I mean, it's great that we have the holiday, and later on I'll be bringing on Carl Mack, who'll be discussing some more historical context for the holiday. But I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really feel like it's much more than them painting Black Lives Matter on the street.
Right.
It doesn't really give us any tangible results. It doesn't change anything for us on our behalf. And when you speak of that, Brother Sam, what I call the catalog of traumas,
right?
We've got a catalog of traumas in this country as Black people, and a holiday is just the beginning of what we need for recompense.
Well, it's that low hanging fruit to say they did something, right? It's like, Juneteenth, we celebrating it anyway. Right. So we didn't need no permission. Right. And, and I know there's Black folks who will celebrate it and will have nothing to do with 4th of July. And so it's that low hanging fruit that we can say we do stuff. and I know sometimes I get in trouble talking bad about the liberals, but we got a whole state full of folks who said they were liberal and was woke way before George Floyd. And it happened in Minnesota. Yeah, it happened. Been happening in Minnesota for a long time.
Mm.
Y'all need to stay in your place. They just happen to do it what we call Minnesota nice way. And it's never been the Minnesota nice. And then the whole thing, and we know they have rules they don't tell us about, but that's been across the board. But like you said, folks and some of the folks who really are showing their colors even more now, because they feel emboldened even more so now after the former individual who was in the White House. I'm not going to get into the name and stuff. Made it okay to be your true racist self, right? And so now so we got to fight that battle, and we got to fight the battle of folks who want to get credit for low hanging fruit. Oh, we're supposed to give you a hand when that this is something we already celebrate, and now so now the federal government workers all get a day off and do whatever. Okay, so what are you going to do on that day? What are you going to do for the people? Well, I mean, that's what we're going to do, but I'm talking about in a bigger sense, right? Those folks who want to get credit. I'm talking about the bigger sense.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I see. Because I want to see. I like to see action. I'm old. See, I know this stuff ain't gonna change, but my grandkids, they're like chips off the old block, and they ain't trying to hear it.
That's it.
Okay, so
that's Georgia. That's one thing I'm noticing, and Sam, I'm noticing that in across the country in general, the younger generations, they're not playing, they're not waiting, they've learned better, and so they expect better, and they're not looking for the same symbolism. They're not looking for just the first black X or the first black Y, the first black chief of staff of whatever. They're not looking for those things. They're looking for actual material, tangible results that are going to affect their lives and improve their lives. And while we'll be happy to take another day off because you guys have been working us to the bone, even during COVID-19, it was more important for you to send us out there to work and make your money than to protect our lives. So we'll be more than happy to take a holiday, but there are just so many.
But we need more than that.
Absolutely.
Yes. Absolutely.
And the young people don't have no problem telling us, and us old people need to get out the way, or get run over. But I mean, not being mean, but sometimes we it's difficult. It's difficult sometimes for us old folks to see what's happening.
Well, and I believe our other guest is here, Katonga Wright. She's a civil rights attorney headquartered in Columbus, Georgia. Good morning, Katonga. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
I realize that you are still working on a case that we talked about, I think, maybe 5 years ago, the case of David Pollard, who was a beloved baseball coach in Columbus, Georgia, and you're still fighting for justice for him. Can you give us an update on where things are at with that case? And for those of you who are not familiar, Coach Pollard was out and about driving to get chalk for an upcoming baseball game that evening when he was killed by a vehicle that police were pursuing. He was killed during a high-speed chase. Officers were trying to apprehend a suspect who had stolen a vehicle, and during that high-speed chase, they ended up hitting his vehicle and killing him, an innocent bystander. And you have been trying to hold the city accountable, but that is clearly taking a very long time.
It is, and justice is often very slow, as we know, in many, many instances, and this is another example of that. We spent quite a bit of time litigating this case in federal court, and in Georgia, you have the ability to dismiss a case and refile it. And after gathering a lot of evidence and facts, that's a decision that we chose, and refile the case in state court, which is a much more favorable jurisdiction under these circumstances. But the case has definitely taken several twists and turns, even in this late hour. Depositions of officers have revealed that there was a supervisor that called off the chase. And after that supervisor announced that the chase should be terminated due to the conditions, it was clear that supervisor was concerned about something happening, and it actually ended up being just that. And so we are looking for justice for his daughter and his wife. It's a real tragic thing that officers in our state and throughout the country, I think, really end up on an ego trip almost in these types of circumstances. While it is important to maintain order and law in our country, I just feel it can't be done at the cost of innocent lives and people like Mr. Pollard. He was just going about his day, had nothing to do with this. It's even questionable whether or not the officers, in fact, knew at the time they began the chase, whether or not this guy even had permission to drive. They never contacted the owner. They never ran plates to figure out or determine ownership before initiating this chase. But even after the chase was terminated, there was one officer that continued to pursue the vehicle moments before the accident. And that's why we're here to seek justice for this family and hopefully send a message that police chases are just not safe for the community.
It feels very reckless because you, in pursuit of a stolen vehicle, which, I mean, if it's a used car, you're talking about the value of maybe $1,000, $2,000, at the most $3,000 on a used vehicle that's been stolen. So here you are pursuing the $3,000 piece of property, trying to recover it, trying to apprehend someone on, a mid-level offense, and then what you're putting at risk is the safety of the general public, because they could have crashed in. That could have been anybody that they crashed into. And it just so happened that, yes, it was a beloved baseball coach who was pouring his whole life work was investing in youth. And so it's very frustrating to see the lack of accountability, that they're even pushing back this much, because I think that it's something that they could have just agreed to take responsibility for right after it happened.
It was definitely a cover-up situation, like many, many cases involving police and litigation and liability. There was a lot of information that was not shared to the public, that only through discovery and this litigation process that we were able to uncover. It's just a really unfortunate thing that time and time again, we have instances of police misconduct, and we just can't allow that to go unchecked.
Well, and it brings me to some things that are happening in Minneapolis again. The National Guard has been activated again. I believe this is the third or fourth time in the last year. And it's so commonplace now that it's not even making national news. And the reason why the mayor made a request to the governor to activate the National Guard is because there has been daily protesting surrounding Winston Smith being killed by a federal task force. And then during one of those protests, a vehicle drove into the protest, hit a parked car, which then propelled forward and killed a protester. And so this has just been bubbling and bubbling over the last few weeks. And it's started to get to a point where the city feels like it's getting out of control. And so the mayor has asked for the National Guard to be activated. Sam, you're here in the cities. What has it been like for you seeing the, I guess you could say, juxtaposition of how people responded to George Floyd globally, and now looking at Winston Smith, who, by the way, despite what the initial report said, he was not a murder suspect. And then according to the only witness, he did not have a gun.
Right. Well, every time one of these situations happen, especially with it in terms of this case, is the more we learn about what police systems don't do, what they're not required to do. They're not transparent. Finding out that you know, in these kind of cases, cameras are not used or involved for only certain groups of police officers. That you know, like you said, he wasn't a murderer. You know, he wasn't, and so why are we taking so many resources to go after this individual? And like you said, the young lady that was in the vehicle with him said she did not see a gun. So we're back at almost the way it's always kind of been, our word against theirs, and we know how that usually goes. But being here in Minneapolis, it's been surreal for me because I live not too far from the third precinct. You know, when we talked about as if some people want to talk about the uprising, or some people want to call it riots, but the third precinct is the original precinct that was set on fire, and so you know it's a little interesting when you know you're in the middle of that, right? You know, you understand it, and you've seen the wrong, and you could feel the pain, and actually feel the anger, especially when you look at that and see, you know, this person killed in cold blood, but at the same time still feeling the repercussions because in the neighborhood you live in, we're just coming back online with drugstores and you know the things that you miss, you know, my post office, the cleaners, and so there ends up being sometimes on some days some mixed emotions. And again, you know, we all were a little bit too comfortable here in Minneapolis, thinking that it wouldn't happen. But if you lived here, you wasn't surprised when it did.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, because I just see the connection between how, and I think Sam, you were alluding to this earlier, the lack of emphasis that's put on the value of Black life versus the overemphasis of how they put value on property.
Right.
And the amount of time, Katonga, as you're telling us the story out of Columbus, Georgia, the amount of time it takes to get justice for Black life, when we see they will send out the National Guard to protect their property that same day. Could you speak to that, Katonga?
Oh, is she frozen?
I believe she may be frozen there. Okay, well, I mean, the same question to you, Sam, because you can see the difference. Like, they respond on behalf of their property years before they would ever even consider responding on behalf of Black lives.
Right, and that's been the history, and so the question comes down to how do we, I don't know, how do we do how do we be in a position to do things differently in terms of, you know, we have to go to such an extent to get somebody to listen to us about our lives, right? Because in the background we still end up hurting on the backside, you know, in these situations. So it is interesting, and you know, it's like, you know, Stevie Wonder can see it, you know.
And Katonga, I see that you're back with us. Ben had posed a question about seeing how long it takes to get justice when we lose a Black life versus, you know, they're almost immediately activating the National Guard to protect their property.
Absolutely. It's really a sad thing that what the law requires is that we put a monetary value on a life. But as we look at verdicts, even when they are brought to trial, brought to a verdict, oftentimes those verdicts for Black lives are significantly less than a white counterpart under the same circumstances and situations. And that's, you know, what do you do as far as helping a jury understand that Black lives do matter, even in the courtroom?
Absolutely. I was curious to know from you too, you know, the case with Winston Smith, he is a little bit different than other police killings because he was actually killed by a deputy who was serving on a federal task force. And so there was no body camera footage because federal task force are not required. In fact, I think they're encouraged to not have body cameras to protect their identity. Do you know, like what is the difference between having a Black person, or anyone for that matter, killed by a local police department versus a federal task force? Because it seems like in this instance, there has been like little response even from that task force in regards to this incident. There hasn't been a statement that's been made. There hasn't been, really any accountability for what happened.
Body cameras are so valuable, not only for the citizens who are wanting answers, but also for the officers involved to protect themselves from situations and helping after the fact understand what happened. And oftentimes those videos help to justify officers' actions. So it's really unfortunate that the federal government has chosen to take a stance to not require body cameras for all officers, even federal officers. But then again, there are many states that still don't require body cameras, Georgia being one of them. It's an elective choice that a department can choose to employ body cameras, but we all know that when there is absent body camera footage and it's the officer's word against a private citizen, the officer's gonna win 9 times out of 10, if not 100% of the time. So that's why body cameras are so important. And it's not surprising that absent body cameras, they feel they don't have to make a statement.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being here this morning. There's so much more I wanted to explore with both of you all, but we are on the clock. So thank you so much for being here. And for those of you who are watching at home, I hope you stick around for more on The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Something to buy, da ba da ba, yeah. Da ba da ba ba buy, da ba buy, da ba buy, da ba ba, yeah. Set the potato, da ba da da. Boy, yeah. Da ba ya ba ya. Sunlight that always stays. Dinner by the waterway. It's that sweet life. Raise your cross. Made some dude crack a smile. He asked if I could stay a while. I'm living that high life. Time to catch a flight, but you can make me go. Unlocking all the memories of my new home. Ventilated echoes playing to and fro, back and forth, yeah. Caught some kids dancing in the alleyway. Crazy how the melodies began to play, yeah. Tell me how you feeling when you hear the lyric, yeah. My heart's in Stockholm. Now I never wanna go home. I left my heart in Stockholm. Now I never wanna go home. Shopping the girl, I brought a girl on my Vespa. She said I already told ya, yeah. I never dated a black guy. I said you're brown yourself. Let me offer help. Come on inside, where everybody knows your name. Everybody knows your name. Time to catch a flight, but you can make me go. Unlocking all the memories of my new home. Ventilated echoes playing to and fro, to and fro, back and forth, yeah. Caught some kids dancing in the alleyway. Crazy how the melodies began to play, yeah. Tell me how you feeling when you hear the lyric, yeah. My heart's in Stockholm. Now I never wanna go home. I left my heart in Stockholm. Now I never wanna go home. Separate again. Sunlight that always stays in and by the waterway. It's that sweet life, sweet life, sweet life. I never wanna go home, go home. I'm living in Stockholm, Stockholm. I never wanna go home, go home. Living in Stockholm, Stockholm. I never wanna go home, go home. I'm living in Stockholm, Stockholm. Yeah. Shut up, I got the bed, the body. We got
Like It or Not with Benjamin Dixon starts now.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another episode of Like It or Not, where we're free to tell the truth and not care who doesn't like it. I am riding solo today, and I'll have my DJ exclusive, James Bubba Williams, or my co-host, Rebecca Azor, or actually she's the host of the show, so I'm just filling in on behalf of Rebecca Azor. But good morning to everyone in your the different chat rooms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, everywhere you're watching. If you're listening to us via podcast, be sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe button all across all the platforms. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be joined later on today. We have a couple of guests coming through. We have Walker Bragman of the Daily Poster. He's going to come through. We're going to talk about some environmental justice, as well as actual policies that we need to get tangible material results on behalf of the people. We'll also be speaking with Brother Carl Mack. He is a former president of the Seattle County NAACP, but more importantly, this brother has a wealth of knowledge. I met him for the first time on Tuesday night and had a chance to speak with him while we were on Roland Martin, or we had a chance to connect with each other from Roland Martin. And we were talking about the history of Juneteenth. So we're going to set the record straight in terms of the history, but also in terms of what should be happening in this country for Black people and poor and marginalized communities all across the country. I first want to start with a couple of headlines to make sure that everyone is up to date with what's happening across the, quite frankly, across the world. A couple of brief headlines. The Senate passed yesterday, and we spoke about this. The Senate passed a bill to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. We'll be discussing the implications and the ramifications, if any, of giving Black people a holiday versus giving us, let's say, reparations. Reality Winner. She is the former military officer who was arrested and charged and found guilty in espionage, but she was actually reporting critical information that, quite honestly, Reality Winner should not have been in jail in the first place, because she was a whistleblower. But however, Reality Winner was released from prison for good behavior. This is major breaking news. If you have been following along her story for the last few years, you do understand the injustice of her spending time in jail in the first place, as compared to now she has been released for good behavior. Julian Assange's father and half brother have been touring the United States to bring attention to the status of Julian Assange's fight for First Amendment rights. We also have the Belarus parades. Belarus officials paraded the detained journalist, Roman Protasevich. They paraded him around in front of the media in a way that really signifies what we should expect going forward in that situation on the global stage. We covered that story a few weeks ago, and how that flight was intercepted by Belarusian officials, and how he was detained. And he was detained for the purposes, his actual charge that he was detained for is for organizing protests. And while we here in the United States are dealing with the other side of the equation, where the system is totally incapable, it's totally capable of absorbing all of our protests, no matter how much protest we make, there are still places on the face of this planet that do not have those same liberties. Kamala Harris becomes the first sitting vice president to march in the Pride event. This is a little bit of old news. We've been wanting to cover this for some time on this show, not because of the reasons that most people probably cover that. But it is good news to see that the United States as a whole has become more accepting of things that fall outside of the standard accepted principles in this country. Those things that fall underneath the purview of white Christian men, which have been ingrained in this country since the founding of this country. But I digress. There's a lot of things that are happening. I want to begin this morning, and I do believe that our first guest is here, so we can, David, if you want, we can jump right into the conversation with Dr. Carl Mack. He has, I consider him to be a historian. I had a chance to speak with you. Dr. Mack, first of all, thank you so much for joining me. How are you this morning?
Oh, Brother Dixon, I'm blessed. Thank you so much, man. Good to see you again.
It is a pleasure. We had a chance to talk extensively yesterday, and this falls right in line with the conversation I was just having with Georgia Ford about Juneteenth, and the fact that it's now on its way to becoming a holiday here in the United States if Joe Biden signs it into law. Let's talk about what we talked about and what you shared with the world on Roland Martin on Tuesday night, the historical inaccuracies of the date and the nature around the celebration of June 17th. Not so much as it pertains, June 19th, not so much as it pertains to the spirit of Juneteenth, but as it pertains to the actual historical record.
Yeah, and you know, I want your audience to understand this, and I you know, because when I say to people that I have an issue with Juneteenth, they get all in their feelings about it, like, oh no, here comes another one trying to rain on our parade. No. See, when white folks tell our history wrong, we get all in our feelings about it, and rightfully so. But now, as the messenger to tell you what's going on and why it's wrong, so I absolutely have no problem with Juneteenth. But I'm going to absolutely tell you what I do have a problem with. I do have a problem with the same thing that we have a problem with when white folks tell our history wrong, is that it's wrong. And it being wrong is also disrespectful. You know, just like now we want to scream that Black Lives Matter. With what's going on with Juneteenth, because of our lack of scholarship, we're saying that 225,000 Black lives don't matter. So let's get into exactly what most of us have been taught about Juneteenth. We've been taught several things. Number one, that these were the last Blacks enslaved, those in Galveston, Texas. So on June 19th, 1865, when General Gordon Granger rode into Galveston, Texas, and found Blacks still enslaved, in accordance to Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, which was first issued on September 22nd, 1862, went into effect on January 1st, 1863. So in accordance with that proclamation, General Granger now issues what we know as General Order Number 3, which we now call Juneteenth. So most of us are saying, hey, these were the last Blacks enslaved. Wrong. We're also saying, well, they got the news a year and a half late. Wrong. Black folks been communicating with Black folks long before the 20th century, through poems, through whatever. You don't think that when Lincoln even issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. You don't think black folks knew about it? It's not about when they knew about it. What were they going to do about it? That's why a war had to be fought. See, again,
Brother Mack, let me jump in there because I want to make sure that that they get some of these key points that you're putting here.
Okay, so
the actual date versus, and there's two parts that I'm hearing here. The actual date is problematic with Juneteenth, but also the fact that even after the slaves in Texas were freed, there were still other black people enslaved in this country.
And that is the crux of the problem. So when we say Black Lives Matter, you know, again, go back into the spirit of Sister Harriet Tubman. They asked the sister, well, why, if you're free, why would you go back? She says, I'm not free until all of us are free. So now here we're trying to celebrate freedom. I'm okay. I get the intent of it. But see, you can't go and celebrate July 4th on July 3rd.
Right.
You can't remember 9/11 on 9/10. But then when it comes to our history, oh, let's just give them anything. And then we as black folks act like it ought to be okay. So again, when white folks get it wrong, we all in our feelings about it. Well, in this situation, we're getting it wrong. So let me tell you what the legislation absolutely is saying. And Brother Dixon, I think I sent you the legislation from the state of Washington as an example.
Okay. Let's see if
so when you look at the legislation for the state of Washington, and you scroll down, and this is House Bill 1016, and this was presented by a black representative by the name of Melanie Morgan. Now, I tried my best to reach out to Sister Morgan. No, she don't want to hear it. She don't want to hear it because what? She's embarrassed that she didn't know our history, and none of us should be embarrassed about it. We all went through pretty much the same educational system where our history was denied us. It was at one time illegal to even teach our people. So the fact that we don't know our history, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But when we, you know, and again, there's a difference between ignorance and stupidity. Ignorance is we don't know, and all of us to some degree are ignorant. Stupid is when you know better and you still do wrong. See, that's the fundamental difference. So in the Washington Bill 1016, it says the legislature intends to designate June 19th as a state paid holiday celebrating the end of chattel slavery. In 1997, there was a senator from the state of Mississippi, Thad Cochran, who introduced a joint resolution in the Senate similar to what just passed a couple of days ago. The headlines on that says, commemorating June 19th, the day that slavery finally came to an end. Over in the House, in that same year, another Republican by the name of J.C. Watts introduced a joint resolution saying exactly the same thing, that we're going to commemorate Juneteenth, the day that slavery finally came to an end. So fam, let me just give you.
But that wasn't the day.
Absolutely, it wasn't the day. So here's the civics lesson. Okay. In order to get an amendment passed, you need two things to happen. You need 2/3 of the Congress to approve the proposal, and you need 3/4 of the states existing to ratify it. At the time that the Civil War ended, there were 36 states in the United States. 36. So of those 36 states, so on January 31st, 1865, 2/3 of the Congress approved the proposal. So they sent it out to the 36 states. That means we needed 27 states to ratify this proposal. On December 6th, 1865, 6 months after Juneteenth, Georgia became the 27th state to ratify the 13th Amendment. But now we got to go back and take a look at the Emancipation Proclamation, because that's where everybody is twisted.
Well, before we go there, before we get to that, because I want to make sure these points actually stick with the audience. So the date that the Congress or the Senate has June 19th, to commemorate the end of slavery. You're saying that what is the actual date? If it's not Juneteenth, what is the correct date that people should be looking at for the end of chattel slavery in this country?
December 6th.
December 6th.
December 6th is the day. Now, I don't want you to get twisted with me and go, oh, well, Brother Mack is just caught up on a technicality. The hell with that. I'm not fucking caught up on a technicality. What I'm talking about is Black Lives Matter. 225,000 of our people were still enslaved after June 19th. Now, if you want to tell me they don't matter, you go deal with that issue.
Right.
But as far as I'm concerned, this ain't a technicality. I'm listening to 225,000 crying souls saying, hey, what do you mean the end of slavery? What about us?
Right.
And the only reason, family, the only reason you want to forget about it and think I'm off my rocker and I'm all in my feelings is because somehow this is an inconvenience to you.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, you gotta, yeah. I mean, you gotta, and I know you understand. I'm saying this for the benefit of the audience.
Sure.
We have to, because when you came on, and we're going to take a quick break. And how much time can you spend with me? Because I have another guest I want to bring in to the conversation, and we'll come back full circle because you have some calculations on reparations that I actually want to make sure that we get in here.
Right.
But because when the first time I met you, which was Tuesday night, and I heard you talking about it, my first inclination was exactly what you're saying. Right. My first inclination was, what's this guy talking about? Like I said, I mean, we laughed about it yesterday, but I'm like, who is this old head out here? We're trying to mess up, like, because I'm looking, Juneteenth is coming up this weekend. I'm looking to have a good time. I'm looking to barbecue and hang out with my family. But then as I started to listen to you, and I started to listen to the preciseness that you were addressing the historical record, you're letting us know that regardless of what we celebrate on Juneteenth, there was still 250,000 Black people still enslaved all the way until December.
And Brother Dixon and everybody else, fire up the barbecues. Let's have a great time, because any day that Black folks were freed from the evilness of chattel slavery is a beautiful day. But do not celebrate under the guise that these were the last Black folks enslaved. There were 225,000 of our people still waiting to taste freedom. So you're absolutely correct. Now, as far as how much time I got, brother, with the love that you are now expressing and trying to educate our people, I got all day with you.
All right, I love it. All right, so we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Walker Bragman of the Daily Poster. We're going to shift the topic just a little, but you'll see that it's all connected. What are we actually tangibly going to get versus the symbolism that they're more than happy to give us? Are we going to get some tangible material benefits from this administration? Or are we going to get it from this government? More like it or not, when we come back after this.
I stay and just repeat it now. Yeah, oh, we dream about all things being alright, but we freeze when it's all up to us. So let's fight it, make a stand and try it. Everything will matter from now on. Let's fight it, there's no way to hide it, 'cause everything will matter from now on, 'cause it's high tide.
now is Walker Bragman of the Daily Poster. He is a reporter, a journalist, and he's been covering politics, progressive politics, for some years now. Walker, thank you for joining us. How are you this morning?
I'm not bad, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing good. Listen, man, it's been a while since we had a chance to speak, but the times that we've covered these stories, we both cover them from the perspective of what can we actually get done for the people. And I was just been looking through your work in general, but listening to your stance on some things, and I'm curious. What let's talk about some specific tangible things that this country can do, not only for Black people but for poor marginalized communities across this country in general. And one of the first things is we talk about the student loans, the fact that student loans could be canceled right now. We talk about HR1, the fact that voting rights need to be protected for all marginalized communities right now. But then we also see the filibuster being used by Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, and almost used as a foil, as an excuse for Democrats to say, well, we can't do anything. So they're more than happy to give us holidays. They're more than happy to give us, symbolism. But when it comes time to actually getting results, it's little to none. What are your thoughts?
Ben, I think you're absolutely right. But I do want to push back on the idea that reparations is not a tangible benefit for everybody, because if you lift up, particularly the Black community in America, that benefits everybody.
Yeah.
No,
I'm not sure if I phrased it poorly like that.
No,
I totally agree.
I know that
if we're waiting on our reparations, Rep One, hashtag Rep One. Go ahead, Walker. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that issue in particular gets framed as like a specific benefit for just one segment of the population. But the truth is that, first of all, not only is it a debt owed, but it would lift up everybody. One of the easiest things to do would be to pump money into the Black community. And
yeah, I mean, it's straightforward, right? It's the same thing we saw with the stimulus package with
exactly
when you put money into the hands of the people, that money stimulates the economy, but also so it doesn't only just benefit the person that received the money, it benefits the entirety of the nation. And so reparations, what you're saying is reparations absolutely is not only a benefit for Black people, but it's a benefit for this country as a whole.
Exactly. And you know what? You also mentioned student debt cancellation. That's another thing that we could do. That there was a study done that the more debt you cancel, the greater the impact on the racial wealth gap. And so student debt cancellation is another thing that you could do. A single payer healthcare system would benefit everybody. I mean, everybody. It's healthcare in America, especially now after COVID, is just, if you got to see that it's not working.
Yeah.
And I think most people understand that. I know you understand that. You've been on this for years. That's why I've been such a big fan of yours for years.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. No, and I don't want to breeze past any of these tangible results, because these are the things that are, at least they're on the board. The possibility of student debt being canceled, that's on the board. Whether or not it'll happen, that depends on the administration. The possibility of a single payer system, it may be years away, but it's on the board. These are actually things that can bring not only the material benefit to Black people and to marginalized communities in general, but these are the things that these corporations are going to be fighting like hell to preserve, because they make so much money doing it. Like when we think about the healthcare industry, the billions of dollars that are made, the hundreds of billions of dollars that are made in profit, that they're not going to go down fighting easily. They're going to fight like hell. Tell us about what we can expect from opposition, generally speaking, when it comes time to doing something for the people, because it seems as though as soon as we try to do something for folks in this country that actually is meaningful, then we get all of the opposition. Then we get people who won't vote down the filibuster.
Well, this is the big problem in our system. I mean, there are a host of problems, but this is one that I think underlies every other issue. Is that there are a lot of as long as money is allowed to just run wild, change is a long shot. And you might get half measures that don't really solve the problem, and they'll be framed as giant accomplishments. And I think we saw that with the Affordable Care Act. It was an effort to do something without attacking the underlying problem in our healthcare system, which is the for-profit motive. But yeah, I mean, every time, even on the most minimal of changes, you see major industry opposition. And unfortunately, the more money that gets spent per election cycle, the more necessary money becomes, and those donors become in the next election cycle. So it's a, I don't want to keep saying the word cycle, but it is a vicious cycle.
No, I was going to echo the same thing. It is literally a vicious cycle. One more thing, Walker, your work over at the Daily Post is some of your recent articles you've been writing about the environment, environmental justice, but also the money that's behind stopping progress on that front. We've had a couple of guests on who have talked about the importance of environmental justice, not only from the Black community's perspective, but for the broader humanity, to be quite honest with you. Talk to us about that entrenched money as it pertains to some of the environmental issues you've been covering over at the Daily Poster.
So I mean, Biden pledged that he would tackle climate change, and he got a lot of good press for his plan let's go back to the campaign trail when Biden's advisors said, well, we're looking for a middle ground, and they took a lot of flack for that. But afterward, they released this plan, and it got a lot of good press. The environmental groups were surprised, I think, because it was not a bare minimum plan. It still didn't include things like banning fracking, but it was more than I think progressives were expecting. But in this administration, which is the best on climate change in my lifetime, you still have very entrenched fossil fuel interests within the administration itself. Like climate envoy John Kerry is invested in fossil fuels. Susan Rice, also policy advisor, also invested in fossil fuels. Eric Lander, science advisor, invested in fossil fuels. And just recently, there was a story, Neil McBride, who was tapped as general counsel of the Treasury Department, sued the Treasury Department on behalf of Exxon, back in 2017. I mean, it's like we have to do something about money in politics, and we have to get it under control, because climate justice, as you said, is essential. It's essential for marginalized communities in the United States, but also globally in the global South. I mean, if climate change could make the equatorial band unlivable, which, I mean, it's unthinkable, but it could make living at the equator impossible.
Man, I'm laughing because it is, for not crying, because of the seriousness with which the seriousness that we're faced with in this country, on this planet, the issues. We're talking about life or death here.
Yeah.
And
for millions of people.
And we're literally doing we're playing this game with our lives. We're playing a game of Russian roulette with our lives over some money.
Yeah.
And that money, not only in terms of the greed of the people making the money, but also the greed of the people receiving the money in Washington, D.C. And it's because of policies like that we're absolutely unable to get the kind of progress that we need. One last thing. I know I said the last question was going to be the last question, but the more you speak, the more I want to unpack with you. I would like for you to just kind of reflect, though, on how this is not an American phenomenon. We're seeing this type of right-wing plutocracy on a global scale. We're seeing this lean towards fascism on a global scale, and we're seeing it not only infiltrate. It's at every level. It's at a national level, it's at our local level, and it's really tied into greed at the end of the day. It's tied into bigotry, it's tied into the desire for wealth, but it's something that we're facing almost like a game of chicken. We're looking at all of the intransigence, all the intransigence. We're looking at all of the greed. We're looking at all of the money in politics, but we're also looking at an impending doom when we talk about the environment, when we talk about the clash of cultures, when we talk about all the things that we're facing. We're really, they're playing games with it. And I quite honestly, it's not just America. Talk about it.
You know, that's a really, really good point. Because the longer we delay in acting, the worse, the higher the likelihood that we face catastrophic consequences. And you know, it's really disheartening, I have to say, sometimes to watch the discourse in this country, because it's very much like we get focused on like pet issues. I know. Not you, but there have been people on the left who have made politics all about one politician or another, and whether or not that politician has betrayed them, or and like, you know, these are very, very deep systemic issues that we need to attack, and we need to look at them as systemic issues and understand that it's way bigger than one politician who you know, you feel may have betrayed one one promise or another. Like these issues that we you know, people have to organize, they have to mobilize. We got to keep talking about them, because having it in the conversation, you keep those things on the table. You keep Medicare for all on the table. You keep $15 minimum wage and debt cancellation. Those have to be normalized. And if it's not happening in Washington because of the money, it has to happen at the grassroots level. And that's why shows like yours are so important. And voices like yours are so important. So I really want to thank you for having me on today.
No, it's our pleasure, and thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you everyone over at the Daily Poster. We've been speaking with some of your colleagues, and we're going to continue speaking with them because of the consistency of the work. So Walker, thank you so much.
Well, they're fantastic.
Yeah, no, they really are. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Ben.
David, take us to a quick break. When we come back, we'll be joined again by Dr. Carl. I can't say Carl. Professor Carl is one of the most difficult words for me to say. I just want to put that on the record. I don't know why, but we'll be joined by Carl Mack again. We're going to talk a little bit more about Juneteenth, as well as reparations, his case for reparations, which I think is pretty fascinating. More Like It or Not right after this.
Something to buy, yeah. Set the sunlight that always stays, dinner by the waterway. It's that sweet life. Raise your cross. Made some dude crack a smile. He asked if I could stay a while. I'm living that high life. Time to catch a flight, but you can make me go. Unlocking all the memories of my new home. Ventilated echoes playing to and fro. To and fro. Back and forth, yeah. Caught some kids dancing in the alleyway. Crazy how the melodies began to play, yeah. Tell me how you feeling when you hear the lyric, yeah. My heart's in Stockholm. Now I never wanna go home. I left my heart in Stockholm. Now I never wanna go home.
Welcome back to Like It or Not, where we're free to tell the truth and not care who doesn't like it. Dr. Mack, I want to bring him back onto the screen. Thanks for hanging out with us this morning. I've got a couple of clips. We're gonna circle back to the reparations conversation as well as the Juneteenth conversation. I just kind of want to get your snap reaction to a couple of clips that we have, if that's okay with you. You have some time for that?
Sure.
All right, this first clip, I want to start with, let's see, I think I want to start with the January 6th Commission. It is a little long, so we'll probably stop in the middle of it, but I really want to know your opinion. We're going to watch a little bit of this clip. What happened on January 6th showed that this country, there's a large portion in this country that is willing to overthrow this country if they do not get their way at the voting booth. So they're basically saying, to hell with democracy. We want democracy only if it works for us. Before I play the clip, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, again, this is the importance, Brother Dixon, of understanding history, because what we saw on January 6th, it happened before, and it happened on a greater, larger scale. And so, we can either talk about it now, or we'll watch the clip, and then I'll tell you historically when this happened, why it happened. So January 6th was not an aberration. It has happened before. And
January 6th has happened before. I want everyone to keep that in your mind as we take a look at this clip and we come back and discuss the times that January 6th has happened before in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the clip is not ready yet. So Professor, Dr. Hart, go ahead and tell us before how this has happened in American history, but at a more even bloodier scale.
And when it happened, it specifically targeted African Americans, specifically targeted us. So it goes back to Reconstruction. The presidential election of 1876 was between two men. And keep in mind that we, as Black folks, were members of the Republican Party. We were the party of Lincoln, right? And the Democrats were the slaveholding party. So the election was between Rutherford B. Hayes and Republican Rutherford B. Hayes and Democrat Samuel Tilden. So that election, like all presidential elections, when you're grabbing for power, especially when Black folks are on the uprise, that election got contested. So right here in nation's capital in Washington, D.C., these two men in an unofficial meeting met in a hotel owned by a Black man named James Wormley in D.C., okay? And they struck a compromise, and that compromise is known as the Compromise of 1877. And so in layman's terms, what happened is this. Tilden said to Hayes, listen, my brother, I'll give you the Oval Office. You can have the White House, but I need something in return. And Hayes says, in an exchange for power, my brother, what is it you would like? Tilden said to Hayes, since the Civil War ended and all these Black folks are freed, the only reason they're able to do what they want to do and live a somewhat of a fair life is because you got federal troops down there protecting them. No different than when you see wars break out now and we leave troops in Afghanistan or anywhere else to maintain the peace. There were federal troops in the South that was protecting us when we were building schools, when we were getting education, participating in the political process. Federal troops were in the South protecting us. So Tilden said to Hayes, I want you to remove all those federal troops. And Hayes says, so if I pull them out, you're going to give me the Oval Office. Deal. They struck the deal. When they removed those federal troops out, everything that all of you saw on video on January 6th, it played out all over the South. They literally walked in and they told the carpetbaggers, and these are white folks who came from the South to participate in the political process, you got a certain amount of time to get out of here. Some of them they gave warning to, but they literally just walked into offices all over the South and literally started killing Black representatives who were in political positions. Literally everything you saw on January 6th, it played out over the entire South because of the Compromise of 1877, where Rutherford B. Hayes agreed to pull the federal troops out of the South in order to become president.
So we see yet again, and I had not heard of that until you know, and I one thing I appreciate about you is that you're okay with the fact that we don't know that everybody doesn't know this history.
Well, Brother Dixon, let me correct you on something. I want folks to understand just a little bit about me. I am a mechanical engineer by trade. I graduated from Mississippi State with a mechanical engineering degree. I never studied Black history when I was growing up, and there were implications of that. It was only in my adulthood that I became extremely curious about who I am as a Black man, and I started studying. So I'm not a historian of academic training, but I am a student, and I'm constantly trying to learn. So I absolutely understand why we don't know, and that's why I so appreciate what you're doing on your program to help us to learn about ourselves. And that's why I'm understanding about the issues behind Juneteenth. That's why I so appreciate Roland Martin. I so appreciate the Black press, because you all are a voice to help us to understand. We as a people just have to humble ourselves. And I got to say this before we go on, Brother Dixon. There were a lot of folks who contacted me after the Roland Martin show, and they praised what you did, because you did what most of us are afraid to do. You said, look, man, I had no idea what that brother just laid on us. Most of us will not admit that we don't know our history, and we'll make the mistakes. You know, it's just like in classroom when our children don't understand and they're afraid to raise their hand and say, I don't know. That's what you did. And so many people that contacted me, literally everybody who contacted me, that was one of the single points that they pointed out. It's the respect that they had for you for acknowledging that, man, I didn't know, and I'm glad that brother helped educate me a little bit. So I just want to say, on behalf of myself and all of my friends, I appreciate your humility and what you're doing to help us to learn a little bit more about who we are as a people and our experience here.
Oh, wow, brother. I appreciate that. No, there's so much that I don't know that I don't have time to pretend I don't have time to pretend like I know it, because I could just as easily just listen to somebody who does. Let's take a listen to this clip. This is a clip where they're discussing the January 6th or the January 6th Commission. And I want us to put this in context of everything that you just said about what happened historically in this country, where January 6th played itself out dozens of times over across the South during Reconstruction. Let's take a look at it, David.
The January 6th Commission, because this really bothers me, and it's like I said, I was horrified by January 6th. I think what happened was terrible. I still see, if you are a journalist in Washington, I see these CNN correspondents running up and chasing down senators in the hallways, being like, Senator, what about the January 6th Commission? Senator, do you support against January 6th Commission? What about subpoena power whenever it comes to January 6th Commission? Meanwhile, and we recently covered this, there is a national reckoning around home prices in America.
Okay, but they're not mutually exclusive, right?
Well,
but the January 6th thing is important.
See, it is important, but is it the 6 months later, should be the ruling number one conversation of a journalist?
I think it's really important. And one of the reasons why I think it's important, because it highlights the reasons why a guy like Donald Trump is so fucking dangerous, is because a guy can incite a bunch of morons to do something really fucking stupid. And now that he's silenced off of social media, and now that, that actually did happen, once it becomes a thing, it could be like mass shootings, right? They didn't exist, then they did. Right. Now they're a thing. So that could be a thing again.
If it was a real commission, I would believe you, Joe. But knowing how these things work, I know that this commission would be some sort of bullshit, like the Benghazi report before it, or many of these others. The way that the politics works around it, it will dominate the news cycle. And here's the thing, though. Washington actually is a zero-sum game. Like, when I'm talking about mutual exclusivity, it actually is. Senate floor time is the most precious thing in D.C. So whatever the driving conversation of the D.C. is that day, it is actually detracting from somewhere else, because these people take vacations literally every other day. The August recess is coming up, all of this. So when we focus on, look, the presidency is really about 100 days. And after that, you're like running for the midterms. And after that, you're running for re-election. In terms of the last, 75, 80 years of the American presidency, the vast majority of major legislation moves in the first couple of months of the administration. And that's it. You're totally dead. And so for the fact that January 6th continues to dominate American politics, I agree with you. It's completely important. And if it was a real commission, yes. But I know that there are these titanic other issues moving within American politics and that are getting zero attention. Lab leak is actually number one. Maybe somebody should go and ask a Democratic senator whether they believe in the lab leak theory or not. So this is the mutual exclusivity, is because the CNN reporter must ask this because he needs to give his bosses something to air on the nightly news that day, which is part of the editorial agenda. Well, the Fox News reporter has to do the same thing, and it comes together to mask all of these incredibly important issues. So it really is a tragedy because it's like you said, I don't want to downplay Jan 6. I actually think it was terrible, and it does show like the power of a demagogue, like of a charlatan whenever you become president. But whenever we're focusing on that at the expense of everything else, and maybe we should even ask, why are these people all why are you willing to storm the Capitol for Trump?
I can help you out with that.
Please tell me.
Because they're idiots. There's a lot of idiots. It's very easy to survive.
So, Dr. Mack, I wanted to bring that clip in. That's a clip of Joe Rogan with Crystal Ball, and I forgot the other gentleman's name in the clip, but they're discussing something that is regularly discussed in media critiques, in progressive politics circles, and some right-wing libertarian circles, and it is whether or not we should get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th as opposed to everything else. It's almost as though they're setting up a false choice here in terms of our ability to investigate what happened on January 6th versus our ability to do something good for the people. And in reality, even if we don't investigate January 6th, we're not seeing a whole lot of actual tangible results for the people. I want you to address that in context of how we messed it up in history the last time, because we didn't get the Reconstruction right. We still are dealing with some of the ramifications. Speak about that.
Okay, well, I'm laughing because I don't want to go back to Reconstruction on my answer to this. You, me, and everybody that's out there that watch television, we all saw it play out. So I absolutely agree with Rogan when he says, we need a commission. I agree with the other brother that says, what is it going to show us? So I compare this to March 3rd, 1991. And this is from a Black perspective, how I'm telling you what I compare it to. So what happened on March 3rd, 1991? We all sat there and we watched a videotape from a Black man on his balcony of a beating of motorist Rodney King. We watched it all play out. And we as Black folks, we sat back, we said, okay, for one of the first times in our history, we absolutely see what's going on. Okay, you want to go to trial? Fine. But what did that videotape do? It made folks say, I don't believe my lying eyes. So back to January 6th, okay, fine, we could do a commission, but all of us heard what Trump said. All of us heard what the mob, how they digested it. All of us saw what they did. And again, when you storm the United States Capitol, when you're out there talking about death to the vice president, death to these congressmen, this isn't what do you need to know here? What is it that the commission is going to say to us that we all did not see? Now, the one thing that I would say you should have a commission for is because to this day, I need to see accountability on Trump. Trump needs to be held accountable to it. Who was Trump's lawyer? And it's escaping my mind, Brother Dick.
If you hadn't asked me, I could see his
former mayor of New York.
Oh, Rudy Giuliani.
Giuliani needs to be held accountable. If there were, so now that I'm asking the questions, okay, fine, I'll go with the commission, because if indeed that there were armed security inside the Capitol who were hugging, as Trump said, and allowing these people to come in, see, they violated their oath, because when you take that oath, you say, I swear to protect against enemies, both foreign and domestic. So if there were security inside the Capitol who conspired and helped these people, all of them need to be held accountable. So from a standpoint of knowing what happened, we don't need a commission for that. But from a standpoint of holding folks accountable, and I'm talking all the way from Trump, Giuliani, all the way to any security guard that conspired with that, if there was information given saying, these are friendlies, let them go, whoever gave those orders. So as I think about it now, Brother Dixon, yeah, a commission should be done, but that commission should be held specifically so that we can hold folks accountable. And when you're talking about holding folks accountable, You're talking about treason here. We're not talking about some misdemeanor. We're talking treason.
That's it. That's it. That's the thing, because they've shown us who was I think it might have been Roland. It might have been you. I don't know who said it the other day, but I brought up the fact that that these people are willing to overthrow the country because they lost an election, and somebody made the point that this ain't the first time. They literally started the entire Confederacy because they couldn't get their way. Right? Treason. They have been committing treason throughout the history of this country because they cannot get their way. And we are seeing very specifically the clash between white supremacy in this country and their desire to control and dominate this American empire and this American system. And if they don't get their way, or even worse, if black folks actually get power, they'll burn this whole thing to the ground.
Okay, so Brother Dixon, I'm going to keep reiterating over and over again. This is why we need to know our history. And this is why they don't want you to do it with this whole critical race theory thing, right? But this is why we need to know our history, because what you just said, here's another historical example of it. Remember in 1954, right? There was something happened in 1954. There was a famous civil rights landmark case, Brown versus Board of Education.
Yeah.
Right? So what did the High Court rule? The High Court basically said that segregation in public education is unconstitutional. You got to open it up. And what did the Southern leaders in the United States Congress did? Have you ever heard of the Southern Manifesto, Brother Dixon?
Yes, yeah.
These cats wrote a manifesto that says, I don't care what you do, but do not integrate public schools in the South. And I am proof positive. My family, I got a picture of my mother, my oldest brother, my 2 aunts, and my first cousins integrating a Jackson public school, Davis Elementary School, named after former Confederate President Jefferson Davis, 3 years after Brown versus Board of Education. So to your point, and if you study history, whenever black folks are on the rise, racism ramps up.
Yeah.
I'll give you this as an example. The Civil War ends April 9th, 1865. You know what happened in December? Now we get the 13th Amendment, right? When we get that 13th Amendment and they've lost the Civil War, 6 ex-Confederate troops met in Pulaski, Tennessee. They formed a little group called the Ku Klux Klan. Why? Because blacks were on the uprise. In 1868, when the 14th Amendment passed and we got citizenship, they began to ramp it up again. And in 1870, when black men got the right to vote, all of a sudden you start seeing all these voter restrictions, voter suppression efforts, the grandfather clause, literacy tests, black codes, all of these things. So every time when Barack Obama gets elected president, all of a sudden we get this resurgence in law enforcement where let's just shoot and kill any black person we want with immunity, qualified immunity. This happens historically whenever black folks are on the rise. And now Biden selects as his vice presidential running mate a black woman. And what do? And they lose the election. Oh my God, we're not going to do that again. Now we're going to institute voter suppression laws. And as a matter of fact, the election was unfair. Forget what the court said, forget facts and anything else. Now on January 6th, we will overthrow the country. That is a common play throughout history when black folks are on the rise trying to get to equality.
There's so much there. There's so much there. I want to play this next clip. It's a compilation of hysteria around exactly what you were talking about, critical race theory. And then I want us to discuss that African proverb that says that until the lions have historians, the history will always be told by the hunters. Let's take a look at this clip.
Right.
Communists like sameness. And that is what you're starting to see with critical race theory and other types of things like this with the school boards.
Punctuality? Racist. Ice cream trucks? Super racist. Shakespeare? White supremacy. Bird racism. We must become actively anti-bird. Us and me and my identity. Let's talk about me and you've offended me.
Cancel culture Twitter mob.
I wonder why. It's liberal privilege.
To which I say I've never said a racist thing about Meghan Markle or anybody else.
The pervasiveness of this critical race theory issue,
anti-American critical race theory,
and some of this racial bullying.
Is our military racist? Is our country inherently racist?
Yes, they are.
I don't know if they meant to answer the question that way at the end, but I mean, there it is. This is just maybe a 45-second clip of the hysteria that goes on all day, every day on every single media outlet, radio station, talk radio, Fox News. All of these outlets are pushing this idea that why are they so afraid of critical race theory?
When you start talking about America's original sin, the inhumanity, again, I want to say the inhumanity of how America was built. That's a shame. That's just far too much for them to take right now, which is why they're trying to stop any kind of study on that. And I want you to understand something. People are going to say, hey, wait a minute. This whole idea of slavery, why are black folks acting like they were the only ones enslaved? Man is enslaved, man, since man's been here. Go back almost 11,000 years. So why are we dealing with this now? Well, I can respect that point, fam, but I want to tell you something that is very unique about American slavery, unlike anything that I know. Now, there may be another example of it. I'm just telling you that I don't know it. So the uniqueness of American slavery that's different from any other form of slavery, and it's not my opinion. All you need to do is go to Article 1, Section 2, Part 3 of the Constitution, and you will see the uniqueness of American slavery different from any other form of slavery. American slavery is the first and only form of slavery that I know that took the slave out of the human equation. What do you mean, Carly took him out of the human equation? Article 1, Section 2, Part 3 define African American, those of us enslaved, as 3/5 of a person. And furthermore, because words matter, and I want to apologize to my ancestors for saying this, we should never say slave, because that implies that we were born a slave. We need to always say enslaved, because that reminds us that somebody put us in slavery.
Come on now.
And that's what they don't want you to understand. They don't want you to see the barbarianism of what they did, the nefarious actions of this country in enslaving our ancestors. So again, when you think about American slavery, and they have to take a critical look at it based on race, this is the abomination that they don't want you to understand. Again, here is the hypocrisy of this democracy. This democracy was based on inalienable rights. In layman terms, family, inalienable rights are God-given rights, not rights that man gives you, rights that God give you. So now this country is founded on the principles of inalienable rights, a democracy. And at the very same time that you do it, you're now going to enslave another member of the human race, which is why when you look at the Constitution, you will never see the word slave. That level of hypocrisy, they just realized was just a bit too much, even for the quote unquote founding fathers. You don't even see the word slave in there, yet they talk about us. So that level of hypocrisy, and see, the importance of history is that history helps you to think critically, which is what you and I are doing now. When we look at January 6th, it harkens us back to the Compromise of 1877. When we hear about the January 6th Commission and what the fatal flaws could be, it harkens us back to March 3rd, March 3rd, 1991, when we saw the Wright and King situation. There's a videotape and you don't believe your own lying eyes. We're not going to believe our lying eyes of what we saw and what could potentially come out of it. When we take a look at what happened with Brown versus Board of Education and the Southern Manifesto to say, forget what the highest court in the land says. See, when it plays in their favor, when you go back to the Dred Scott decision, right, of 1857, when you look at that decision, when Chief Justice Roger B. Taney said, when the Constitution was written, the black man had no rights by which the white man had to respect. Oh, they want to adhere to that. They want to adhere to that. Plessy versus Ferguson, they want to adhere to that. But when you start talking about equality, Oh no, we're gonna change the rules. Here's America talking about their capitalistic society and how competitive we are, and we'll compete with the best in the world. But when black folks and other minorities start voting, no, there's too many people voting, we need to change the rules. History is full of that. That is the type of critical thinking that they're most afraid. And as Malcolm said this, of all of our studies, history is best qualified to reward our research, because when you find that you have a problem, all you have to do is study the historical methods of people with problems like yours. And when you find out how they solve theirs, you'll know how to solve yours.
That's it.
They don't want you to know history.
Professor, we have I've already held you a long time, but we still have the reparations conversation a little bit more. We got to dovetail on Juneteenth. I want to take it to the after party because I want to take the filter off. Right now, we're doing the public show. The after party is where we go. We let our hair down. I mean, you can let yours down. I can't let mine down. But we're gonna take 5. David, give us about 5 minutes of music. We're gonna take a break. Dr. Mack, go get you some coffee or something. When we come back, we're gonna come back with the after party. And in the after party, we're gonna get down to nitty gritty on reparations. We're gonna get down to nitty gritty on all this other stuff, and we're gonna take the filter off because there's no edit. There's no censorship in the after party. Go. What's that, Professor Mack?
So Brother Dixon, before we go to the after party, for those who are tuned in, I need you to pull up 2 documents.
Yes.
I need you to pull up Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. It starts with the migration. And then I need you to pull up the Mississippi Letter of Secession. Those 2 documents are going to be germane to my argument for reparations.
Okay. You know what? And actually, we're going to the after party, David, but keep that link live in public. So if anybody who's watching it live in public, they can stay and watch it because I want as many people as possible to hear it. We're going to clip that segment that we're going to do on reparations. We're going to share it, but I want us to have the freedom to discuss it, not on the public airwaves. So that said, we'll have more likely than not tomorrow morning, regular time. Everyone stay tuned for the after party. We'll be back with Dr. Carl Mack as we discuss reparations, and we'll see you next time. David, it's in your hands.
The truth is hard, life's so much better. Won't you let me stay here forever? Light up in the sky, full of treasures.
You off, you left me out for dead. Ever since I was a teen, had prices on my head.
had to cut you off, you left me out for dead. They do what I do, I'm like Simon Says. Just picked up some bands, come again. They do what I do, I'm like Simon Says. Yeah, I'm the running man, rapping rubber bands. They do what I do, I'm like Simon Says. Just picked up some bands, come again. They do what I do, I'm like Simon Says. Yeah, I'm the running man.
Don't feel right. I still wanna party with her. Oh yeah. Even when it don't feel right. You know I'ma party with her. We been chillin' on through Wednesday, slept until it's Thursday. She don't wanna leave me, not just yet. Told me all about last Friday when she went all crazy. Didn't go to bed till Saturday. I don't wanna go without, so I asked her to stay. Though she broke my heart in a million ways, but I'm putting that aside now. I'ma feel alright now, happy just as long as she's with me. I've been trying my luck every day of the week, yeah. With my baby, what's up? Always down every weekend. No, I love her too much, but I just can't get enough. She's slipping through the cracks.
It really use a change of scenery. Yeah. Everybody smoking all the greenery. Yeah. Close the match 'cause they were handed down to me. But I'm still fly, I know. I'm still fly, let's go. It could all be worse, I could be a hater like you. It could all be worse. Pills to make the man, but that poison's gonna kill you. From the inside out. So right now, say it with your chest now, say it with your chest now. I'm young, I'm free, can't nobody take me here and now. It's my time to run it out. It's my time to ride it. I'm young, I'm free, can't nobody take me here and now. It's my time to run it out. It's my time to ride it out. It's your time. Oh, cheers to all the haters, 'cause you proved to me that rising to the top was my destiny. And you can see whatever from behind me, but I'm still fly, I know. I'm still fly, let's go. It could all be worse, I could be a hater like you. It could all be worse. Clothes to make the man, but that poison's gonna kill you. From the inside out, it's time to say it with your chest now, say it with your chest now. I'm young, I'm free, can't nobody take me here and now. It's my time to run it out. It's my time to ride it. I'm young, I'm free, can't nobody take me.
Welcome to the after party. I didn't really tell you a whole lot about what we do here on Like It or Not, the Benjamin Dixon Show, but we have an amazing community. Our producer just dropped a link in our chat here. You have to copy it and open it in another tab, but it'll take you to the chat room where everyone is chatting and hanging out. We usually have somewhere around 1,000 people watching us every morning between all of the live streams. And then obviously we put out a podcast afterwards, and it gets all the downloads that it gets. But we have a great community of people who have been listening to you this morning and giving a lot of feedback. One of the listeners said this morning that they heard you mention that you're an engineer, and they're talking about the need for STEM to be brought, not only brought into schools, but particularly targeting Black people, Black students, in terms of analytical skills, is so many other things that they were talking about. But that just brought me back to what you do and who you are. So could you briefly tell the audience about some of your background as it pertains to engineering and STEM?
Okay, so when I graduated from Mississippi State University with a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering, and I worked as a practicing engineer in Seattle for 18 years, designing wastewater treatment plants. And in 2005, I was offered a position as the executive director for the National Society of Black Engineers, located in Alexandria, Virginia. And so the mission of NSBE, which you may know by that acronym, is to increase the number of culturally responsible Black engineers who excel academically, succeed professionally, and positively impact the community. So at the time that I became an engineer, our problem then, as it is today, is that we didn't have, if you look at all the colleges and universities, accredited colleges and universities in this country that are graduating undergrads of African Americans and engineers, at the time we were stuck around at 3,000 to 3,500 for God, almost 20 years. So one of the things that I did in order to address the pipeline is to realize, and again, understanding what my trajectory was and what has been known from studies is that, by the time you're in the 8th grade, you got to be taking algebra. So for those kids who are taking algebra in high school, you're way behind the curve, because what ultimately roots us out of engineering is that when we get to college, there's 3 courses that weed us out: chemistry, calculus, and physics. So if you don't have that basic foundation, you're going to get weeded out. And so if you took 10 American Black students and they went to colleges and universities and declared engineering as a major, we're going to lose 7 of them. So what I decided to do was, then why don't we go deeper into the pipeline and begin to expose our children to engineering at an earlier age? And again, I took that from my own life, because when I grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, I didn't know anything about engineering, but the one thing I did know, that there was a railroad yard right down the street from where I lived on Fairbanks Street, and on Mill Street, there was a railroad yard there. So I literally, this is how little I knew about engineering. I thought I was going to Mississippi State to learn how to drive a train. That's what I thought. That's how little I knew. But was that my fault? No, because I wasn't exposed to engineering. So in this program, I designed a program called SEEK, the Summer Engineering Experience for Kids. And we were going to get children as early as 3rd grade. And we were going to expose them to engineering. But who is the we that was going to expose them to engineering? So I said, what better role models than to take all of these Black college students around the country who are studying engineering and bring them in the summer. And for 3 weeks, we're going to expose our children to engineering. So in this program in DC, we had the largest engineering camp in the history of America for Black kids. So as an example, when we started in DC, imagine 600 African-American children for 3 weeks studying engineering, and their mentors are Black college students from all around the country.
Wow.
So what we did in DC, we replicated in 10 cities by the time that I had left. And then in my hometown of Jackson, Mississippi, I'm so proud of this. It was the largest engineering camp in the history of America for Black girls.
Wow.
We had a 3-week camp in Jackson, Mississippi, all Black girls. We had 360 Black girls. And then we had over 50 African-American female college students from around the country that descended in Jackson. And because the public school system was too idiotic to understand this gift that we was bringing them, they wouldn't allow us to have a school that was dormant in the summertime. Nobody's using it. We just asked them, could this be our base that we bring this program in? And it was an African-American superintendent who was too dumb to understand that. So my mother took me around the corner to her church, New Hope Baptist Church. The pastor is Dr. Jerry Young, who's now the president of American Black Baptists. Dr. Young heard me for 5 minutes and said, Brother Mack, we have a church school here. So can we host your program? And at New Hope Baptist Church, we had the largest engineering camp in the history of America for Black girls for 3 weeks. And here's the thing I want you to understand, family. This program, for every camp that we ran, for 300 children, it cost us $200,000 to run that camp. We charged African-American parents $0. The admission for them to have their child in the STEM camp was that those parents had to come to our parent orientation. And if they did that, we fed their children physically. So we provided lunch, and we fed them intellectually by bringing this young powerhouse of Black students from all around the country for 3 weeks for free.
Wow.
To expose our children to engineering. So
that
that's
is
what I used to do.
that is amazing. Everyone in the chat room is really when you told me that, I was blown away at the scale, but also at the attention to detail. You made sure that you were looking out for those young Black folks.
Yeah, and the thing I want people to understand is this. So many times when you have engineering camps like this, right? A lot of these colleges have put them on. They'll charge you an exorbitant price to go to these camps. And then other thing that they did was that they would give a child a test and to determine whether or not that child had the aptitude to study engineering. We're talking about 3rd through 5th grade children. How are you going to test me at a 3rd grade level and tell me I'm not qualified to be an engineer?
Come on, man.
I'm not trying to hear that. So when we had our camps, we didn't test no child. We had children who came from single parent homes who were model students, if you will, 2-parent households that were model students, if you will. Some that came from 2-parent households that were baby children. We didn't care. We brought them in. And so the way that we dealt with that is that, again, my ratio of children to mentors was 6 to 1. So if I had 300 children, I needed 50 mentors. I didn't need any mentor to have more than 6 children so that each mentor could work intimately with those children. And if we had behavior problems, I said to the parents, we may have some issues with children, but children are being children. So let us sit behind closed doors and let's work it out. But let's not quickly go, I don't want my child coming and we got to kick them out of the camp. No, that's what America's been doing. And I got to tell you, those 10 cities that we were in, let me just mention them. We were in DC, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Detroit, Jackson, Mississippi, New Orleans, Houston, Denver, San Diego, and Oakland.
Oh, you went to the
Blacks. The parents that came to our camps, they were so loving, so understanding. Even when we had minor issues, we were able to work those things out. And I'm just so proud of the program. I'm so proud of the parents, because one of the things that the business world used to say, well, you know, Dr. Mack, I don't know if this is going to work. The parents are not going to get involved, just like PTA, the parents ain't get involved. I said, first of all, you're a white man. You don't know nothing about my community, especially when it comes to engineering. We're the experts. So when they would come to a parent orientation, I want you to imagine this on a Saturday morning, what a parent orientation for the summer engineering experience for kids put on by NSBE looked like. We would fill up auditoriums. If that auditorium held 600 people, we'd have 1,200 people there.
Wow.
And there were some parents who came there knowing that their child hadn't been accepted in the program. And when they came, we go Apollo style. I go family. I know that we filled up, but we got 5 kids here. The parents done showed up. Should we let them in? You tell me. And the audience be like, let them in. And we like, let them in. And that's what we did. We didn't turn none of our babies away. But that's the type of effort that we need to increase that pipeline of Black engineers. And I had no shame in my game of fighting for that. And then some sponsors say, well, you know, Dr. Mack, you're making this for Black kids. Yes, I am. But if other kids want to come, they're welcome. But understand this, family. Imagine that I'm a financial planner and I'm trying to tell you how to manage your money, but I personally have filed bankruptcy. So I told the white folks, listen, don't tell me to go out there and solve everybody else's problems when I got problems of my own that I can't solve. So I'm going to work on my problem. If other kids want to come, fine. But my focus is Black children, unapologetically.
Come on.
You either get with that program or shit, get the fuck on. Don't mind. Sorry.
Well, you said we at the after party. I didn't know if I needed to text you and be like, hey, we in the after party.
My bad.
No, I was gonna say you can let it rip now. I was say we around family now. That's what I love about the after party. These are people who make the show possible. I can't wait till you get a chance to meet some of them. We do a twice a month. We do a patron party where we have we get to see and interact with the people who support the show, and it's really phenomenal. So their family.
And thank all of you for supporting the show, Brother Dixon. I swear, man. We ain't met, man, but we are brothers. I love you, and I love you. I just love what you're doing. God bless you.
Oh, thank you, man. I really can't wait for you to meet the rest of the squad. Rebecca Azor, she's the host of this show. I'm just kind of filling in for her. And then we have DJ Exclusive, the DJ who normally has our music and just gives the life and give the vibe. And then at the top of the show, top of the morning, we have Georgia Fort, who was here this morning, and she brings a laser focus on police murders of Black people. And so we have, we have a really amazing team of people here, and I can't wait for you to get a chance to share some of your knowledge with them. Speaking of, let's go to your case. Well, let's finish out the conversation about Juneteenth, because it is important.
Yes.
And one of the things that you pointed out, I think you said Thad Cochran or Trent Lott, one of them, they signed they made the notation in their legislation marking Juneteenth as the official end of slavery, and that got echoed in the Senate. So it was on the House record, now it's on the Senate record. So this thing has gone from being a cultural phenomenon. It started in Texas, and it became a cultural thing, and we all started celebrating it. It became folklore. And you're saying that that's one thing for the culture to get it wrong, but look at the ramifications of us getting it wrong. Now this nation's official record is getting it wrong, saying that June 19th versus December 6th was the end of slavery.
So I think I sent you a picture, and if he could pull it up, it'd be so great. But it was a placard. I was invited by some Army generals to come down and meet with them to speak about engineering when I was the executive director. And I was invited down in Virginia, Jamestown. Go to the other placard. It's one where I'm in the picture. There you go. So this placard is supposed to mark, stand as a location of where the first Africans came to what was called British America, 20 and some odd Blacks, right, at Jamestown. Now, if you look at the last line in the bottom of that placard, it says the U.S. abolished slavery in 1863. Now, this placard was put up by the Department of Historic Resources. They have nothing else to do except understand the history of this country. And they said that slavery was abolished in 1863, when in fact slavery was abolished on December 6, 1865. But why did they say 1863? Because they were talking about the Emancipation Proclamation, which did not end slavery. Now, my brother, I want you to bring up the other placard, because let me tell you what happens when we know. So when I left Virginia, I got back home and I called up the Department of Historic Resources. Oh, they put me through some hoops, but I stayed on the call. And I said to them, listen, as much as I can appreciate what you're trying to do by marking that location, I think it's certainly a valuable point in our history of our country, that in August 20th, 1619 is when the first Blacks came to this nation. But that last sentence you got on that placard is absolutely wrong. They said, well, Dr. Mack, what do you mean it's wrong? I said, you put down that slavery was abolished in 1863, and slavery wasn't abolished in 1863. Well, it took them some time, family, but they put a new placard up. And if you look at that last sentence, it says the United States abolished slavery in 1865. Now, again, it's important for us to get the history right. But again, I don't want you to think that I'm caught up on the technicality. Now, I sent you a picture. Now, I want all of you to try to remember the inauguration of President Obama. And if you can't remember that, I want you to remember that iconic picture of the March on Washington.
Yeah.
Where that picture was taken from the steps of the Capitol, and you looked all the way back. There's the picture in front of you. That's what 225,000 looked like, because that's how many people attended the March on Washington in 1963. That's how many of our ancestors were still enslaved in Kentucky and Delaware after Juneteenth. So when the United States Senate a couple of days ago passed a resolution saying that Juneteenth ended slavery in this country, what about those 225,000 of our people that were still enslaved? How do you dismiss that?
Yeah.
And I can tell you how it's being dismissed, because not enough of us are using our scholarship to correct that issue. And again, this is where you, Brother Dixon, warmed my heart, because just like you, I didn't know this at first, but there are some Black folks that I would try to educate about this. No, there he go trying to piss on it. Here we finally got something. You're trying to piss on it. You finally got something. Well, what about the 220? You finally got something. What about the 225,000 that's still enslaved? What did they get? I think what they got. They got forgotten. And I'm not about doing that. See, right now, to any of you listening, let me try to celebrate your birthday on any other date that's not your birthday. I bet you want to correct me.
Come on.
And if you married, go home with a gift the day before or the day after your anniversary. Watch how mama deal about that. See, go in there and try to celebrate Independence Day in this country on July 3rd. America got something to say about that.
Yeah.
But let them pass a legislation saying that slavery ended on June 19th, and you okay with that. And you're not okay with it. For no other reason than you just don't know. And so again, this is what the education is about.
And I appreciate something else that you did. You didn't leave the onus, because I didn't know the history. We don't know the history. And quite frankly, it's understandable that we don't know our history when we look at how hard they're fighting against us, even learning some basic history, so it's to be expected. And so I appreciate that you didn't lay it all at our feet. You also took Congress to task. Yes. And because they have the capacity and the wherewithal to get to the bottom of any of this, as they should when they're talking about doing this kind of work.
Listen, I believe there's only 27 amendments to the Constitution of the United States. 27. How do you not know, Congress, that the 13th Amendment ended slavery? How do you not know the civics lesson? That on December 6, 1865, Georgia became the 27th state to ratify the amendment, which ended slavery. How do you not know what the Emancipation Proclamation said, which means that Delaware and Kentucky, who were border states along with Maryland and Missouri and West Virginia, that slavery was not impacted by the Emancipation Proclamation? How do you not know that, Congress? Department of Historic Resources, how do you not know that? Yes, I'm taking you to task on it. So again, for them, I don't have, because see, I'm looking at this saying, see, this is a political move. Let us do this. We don't care if it's wrong, as long as it keeps the black folks happy. Don't matter about their history. We need to care. We need to care because those 225,000 souls are screaming out to us, get it right. I just watched an episode on 60 Minutes this last Sunday, and they was talking about the Clotilda. It would now, if you take a look at, and we're going to talk about Article 1, Section 9, but Article 1, Section 9 talks about the Atlantic slave trade. And it said that from 1788 to 1808, during that 20-year period, you can import as many slaves to this country as you want to. But after 1808, the importation of slaves to America is illegal. That's what it says. So now, in the 1850s, here comes this ship called the Clotilda that has an illegal cargo of blacks on that ship. And they just talked about it. And the descendants of the Clotilda said, it is important for us to remember our ancestors. Family, I'm saying to you, I'm not trying to be technical here. I'm saying to us, we have to remember the 225,000 that were still enslaved. We have to pay homage to our history. We got to respect our history. Go in there and tell any other, the Asian culture. If you go to their homes, you're not going to walk in that home with your shoes on. Their culture just says, hey, that ain't what we do. And so when you walk in there with your shoes on, you're completely disrespecting them. When you get my history wrong, our history wrong, and you forget those 225,000, I got issues with that. And that's what we're talking about now. So now that we own Article 1, Section 9.
Well, hold that thought, because I'll bring up the picture of the March on Washington again.
Okay.
Because that's 220. That's 250,000 people.
Yes.
And that's how many people were still enslaved for an additional 6 months between the time Juneteenth is commemorated and the actual end of slavery.
Now, Brother Dixon,
do I have that right?
Yes. And I hope you can bring this up. Now, I want you to understand where the research comes from this. I sent you a link for the legislation that was proposed to commemorate Juneteenth from the state of Kentucky. If you can bring that up, it'd be great if you can bring that up, because I want us to read that, and I want to show you exactly what the state of Kentucky did. They told you the truth in so many ways. They told you the truth. They only had one little error in there that I saw, but that error, you know, that's more technicality. So if you can find the legislation from the state of Kentucky on that link that I sent to you, it would help you. But I'll read it to you. I'll tell you what it says.
And he'll have it on the screen momentarily. I'm sure he'll have it. But go ahead.
And so as he's bringing it up, I want you to understand this, that this legislation was passed by the Kentucky legislative body on March 11, 2005. And in this legislation, they tell you, whereas the Civil War ended in April of 1865, but bondage did not end for approximately 225,000 Kentucky slaves until the 13th Amendment was ratified on December 18th, 1865. That's the part they got wrong. It wasn't ratified on December 18th. It was ratified on December 6th, 1865. But the important message that they're telling you is that there were still 225,000 of our ancestors in the state of Kentucky still enslaved. And then when you go just 2 lines under there, and I'm gonna see if you got it up. Yes. Now, if you go 2 lines under there, where it says, whereas Juneteenth or June 19th, look at the word that they use. They say, whereas, stop it right there. That's good. Whereas Juneteenth or June 19th, 1865 is considered the date when the last slaves in America were freed. You see what they said? They told you the truth. You can act as though it was, but Kentucky is telling you. They just told you right above there, 2 sentences above, a passage above that there were 200 right there. Whereas the Civil War ended in April of 65, bondage did not end for 225,000 family. This is what I'm talking about, the misrepresentation of Juneteenth. I'm not trying to play historical fact checking with you on that just to be playing it. I'm talking about remembering a day. If we want to celebrate true Freedom Day,
right?
Does it make sense to celebrate Freedom Day for Black folks when 250,000 of our ancestors are still enslaved? You tell me the rationale of that. Anybody tell me the rationale. You'll never convince me that that's worth celebrating. But am I saying let's not celebrate Juneteenth? I absolutely am not saying that. I am not saying that.
That's what I'm talking about. I love it. I absolutely love it, because we gonna turn up on Juneteenth, because and this is something that you said. You were like, I mean, truth be told, Emancipation Day is a different day for every person that got free.
Yes. Now listen. Now now they want to say it's the oldest celebrated holiday. No, it ain't the oldest celebrated holiday. It may be the most popular one. So let me give you this. And this also plays into the reparations conversation. Anybody in DC recognizes April 16th. See, and the reason they recognize April 16th is this. See, on April 16th, 1862, the Congress of the United States and Abraham Lincoln, they decided they needed to end slavery in the District of Columbia. So you know what they did, fam? They paid reparations to white slave owners.
That's right.
They paid each slave owner $300 for their enslaved individual. And then for the enslaved person, they told them this: we'll give you $100, but if we give you that $100, you got to leave America. But for the enslaver, here's 3 times that amount and keep the party going. So April 16th, in the District of Columbia, the nation's capital, that's Emancipation Day. So, but to the point that Brother Dixon said, if you understand that the Civil War was fought over slavery, and in case you're confused about that, when we pull up the Mississippi Letter of Secession, Mississippi, my home state, they're going to absolutely tell you why they left the Union. And not only will they tell you that, but family, I want you to see, most people know that Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederacy. If you ask most people who the vice president of the Confederacy was, they don't know. The vice president was a man named Alexander Stephens. So now that we got the Mississippi letter of secession up there, I want you to take a look at what it says. Look at what the letter says. If you look at the second paragraph, and Brother Dixon, if you can read that second paragraph, which starts with our position.
You're going to make me grab my glasses.
Oh, okay, then I'll do it. Here we go, family. The Mississippi letter says, in this momentous step, which our state has taken in dissolving its connection with the government of which we so long formed a part, it is but just that we declare the prominent reason. Understand what the word prominent means, which has induced our cause. In layman's terms, we're going to tell you exactly why we seceded from the Union. That next paragraph, they say, our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery. The greatest material interest in the world is labor supplies the product which constitutes by far the largest, most important portions of the commerce of the earth. And then look at what these folks say. They say these products are peculiar to the climate virgin on the tropical regions. And by the imperious laws of nature, none but the black race can bear exposure to the tropical sun. Now, family, in layman's terms, what the state of Mississippi said, we left this union because of slavery. And we need slavery because shit, it's hot in Mississippi, man. That damn humid and that heat. We can't get out there and pick that cotton. And that cotton. And I'm telling you right now, shit, God made black man to pick that cotton. In layman's terms, that's what they saying.
That's what they said.
That ain't what I said. I'm just telling you what they said. Now, I want you to stroll down until you get to the second to the last paragraph, because this leads us into the conversation about reparations. See, it starts with utter subjugation. Brother Dixon, you got your glasses on. Can you read that? Because I don't want you to think I'm making it up.
Okay, no. Okay. Oh, I zoomed my screen in. I'm good. Utter subjugation awaits us in the Union. If we should consent longer to remain in it, it is not a matter of choice, but of necessity. We must either submit to degradation and to the loss of property worth $4 billion of money.
Stop right there. Don't say nothing else. Now, in the Mississippi letter of secession, they placed a value on the free labor of our ancestors. And how much was that value, Brother Dixon?
$4 billion of money.
In 1861, who the hell knew what $1 billion was? And then they didn't say 1 billion. They said what?
4.
No, not 4. They said 4 billion. 4 billion. Now, I'm going to ask you today, family, what number comes out that trillion? See, I still don't know.
I don't know.
Who the hell knew what $1 billion was in 1861? But the state of Mississippi, they said we were worth $4 billion to them. Now, here's the arguments against reparations. See, most of us, when we make the argument, we make a very subjective argument. A subjective argument means that we're arguing what we feel. An objective argument is based on facts. So I'm going to take my feelings out of this argument. Okay. Now, the other argument against reparation is, well, everybody who was enslaved, dead. Everybody who was a direct descendant of those enslaved, dead. Everybody who was a slave owner, dead. Everybody who was a direct descendant of those slave owners, dead. So unless you can find an entity that is alive today, that was alive yesterday, that benefited directly from slavery, nobody should have to pay. Okay, I'll accept that, fam. But so here's my question. Was the state of Mississippi around yesterday? Check. Is the state of Mississippi around today? Check, check. Now, did the state of Mississippi place a value from which we can work from on our ancestors? Check, check, check. Now, you're going to look at this and you're going to say to yourself, yeah, Carl, but that's too much money. Nobody's going to pay. Now, I heard you, Brother Dixon, earlier when you was talking about reparations, and we talked about how it's good for everybody. And you said, look, what about the stimulus checks that went out to everybody? Do you remember how much money this country spent during the pandemic to keep the economy going?
Trillion.
Out of nowhere, not a trillion, over $10 trillion. Boom, just like that, this country pulled up. $10 trillion was paying people to stay at home more than they was making when they was working. This country can do whatever it wants to do financially. So when you start telling me, oh, that may be too much money. The only reason you say that is because you don't know your value. See, that's like Kobe Bryant playing in the NBA. And is it possible, Brother Dixon, that Kobe could have signed a contract for $100,000? Is it possible?
Not likely. But
is it possible?
It's physically possible, yeah.
It is possible. See, if Kobe didn't know his value, he could have signed a contract for $100,000. But that sounds ludicrous to you because all of us know the value of Kobe. That's why this calculation is not ludicrous to me, because I understand the value of free labor for almost 150 plus years of chattel slavery, free labor. I understand that value. So if you could, my brother, pull up my calculation for reparations.
This is these are the PDFs you said.
There you go, right there. Now, remember I told you I studied.
You know, you did the whole calculation. Let's do it.
So I want you to understand this. I studied engineering at Mississippi State, took a class called Engineering Economy. And in that class, they said, if you want to know what somebody owes you in the future, you have to know what they owe you today. And then based on how many years you want to give them that money with an applied interest rate, you can calculate today what somebody will owe you in the future. So based on that formula, and that formula is this: F is equal to P times 1 plus I to the n. There's nothing complex about that formula. F, that's what you owe me in the future. P, that's what you owe me today. I, that's going to be the assumed interest rate. Now n, and remember, look where that n is. That's an exponent. That's the number of years you've been owing me that money. So if we go all the way back to 1851, I'm just going back to 1851, when they wrote the letter of secession. Now, if you want to go back, you can go all the way back to the date, to the year that Mississippi became a state. But let's just go back to 1851. So the formula is this: P, that's the present value. What's the present value based on the Mississippi letter of secession? $4 billion. Brother Dixon, I ain't got but one question for you. Where did you get that $4 billion from?
I got that from their own mouth.
Who said that, Brother Dixon?
Mississippi letter of secession.
Said that. I didn't say it. Brother Dixon didn't say it. Ain't none of y'all saying it. Mississippi said we were worth $4 billion of money. So now you take the $4 billion, take me back to that formula. Let's apply a 6% interest rate. That's all. I'm not applying the MasterCard 18-21%.
You're not charging them the interest they're gonna charge us. Go ahead.
No, fam, I ain't doing that. We're just gonna charge them 6%. So 1 plus 6%, 1 plus I, 1.06. Now that n, now I did this, and I cannot remember, but this may be a year off. But if you go from, just take 2021 minus 1851. 155, 156. So I may be a year off because I did this calculation last year sometime. I played with this. Every year I change it.
So, but they owe us a year more.
Okay, so it's 156. So basically, you take $4 billion. Well, first of all, you take the 1.06. Remember your math. Take the 1.06 and do an exponential of 156. In this case, 155. And then you take that number and multiply it times 4 billion. And the answer is that in today's dollars, based on what they valued us at in 1851, is 33 trillion, 455 billion, 621 million, $904,763.77. And yes, family, we want the damn 77 cents. You're damn Skippy. I want it. I want every fucking penny you owe. You understand?
Bring us back on the screen.
I'm not fucking around. I want the 77 cents. Now, take me back to the formula.
Oh, man. You got more. You're not done.
Now, that 33 trillion, that was just the state of Mississippi. Do you know how many slave states there were?
Oh,
10 plus 6. It was 16 of them.
Oh.
And since Mississippi is the last of everything, we're going to consider that to be the least number that you could owe us.
Oh,
we
man.
don't take that. So now multiply the 33 trillion times 16. Now, I didn't make up the Brother Dixon, did you make up the 4 billion?
The Mississippi Letter of Secession gave it to us.
None of us did that.
Right.
See, this is why they don't want the critical race. That's why they don't want you thinking critical. See, but if you place a value on me, now I want you, family, I want you to think about this. See, I didn't try to place a value on the separation of families, raping our women, all atrocities, okay? How do you place a value on it? Okay, I left it alone. But I went back to their arguments. See, I listened carefully to them and see if you, and where did I get this line of thinking from? I got it from Thurgood Marshall. See, what made Thurgood Marshall so effective is that Thurgood Marshall took the one document that America says she got so much respect for, so much love for, the Constitution of the United States, and he used it like a hammer against them. Now, since we talking about the Constitution, I ain't done with reparations.
That's right.
So if you could pull up Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution.
Right. My man.
Pull up Article 1, Section 9, and let's do some Thurgood Marshalling right here. Man, I swear I'm having so much fun.
Because you were dealing, that was just the state of Mississippi.
That was just state of Mississippi. Now, remember when we was talking about the Clotilda, right? And we said that slavery you couldn't import any more slaves to the country after 1808. See, the one thing about God is a beautiful God. He always got it right there for us. But remember their argument? Unless you can find somebody who benefited directly from slavery yesterday, and that same entity is here today, why should I have to pay?
And earlier you said direct descendant. You're saying the direct descendant means that person's child. So their excuses have been the slave owners, and nor their children are here anymore.
None of them here. Or if you want to go and try to find corporations, okay, fine. If you can find United Pacific or some company who benefited from it, great, go get them. That's fine. No problem with that. I just found what I thought was the best corporation, the United States government. Now, here's the argument. Let me take out the subjectivity. Family, this document that we're using as the basis of our argument, I need you to keep in mind, this is the Constitution of the United States, Article 1, Section 9. And I think it reads something like this. The migration or importation of such persons as any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit should not be prohibited by the Congress prior to the year 1808, but a tax or duty may be imposed on such importation not exceeding $10 for each person. Now, you remember earlier when I told you the hypocrisy of this democracy? They were so embarrassed that they would never use the word slave. Here's a prime example. Now, when they started this section off, they were trying to be ambiguous because they didn't want you to think critically and know what it is they were talking about. So they started off by saying the migration. But now look at the conjunction, the migration or importation. What does or mean? Either or, one or the other. You could choose either one. But now go down further in the text and look at who, no, stop right there. Stop. Don't go no further. No, right there. But look at who they applied the tax to. Who did they apply the tax to?
There's some slick
yes. Who did they apply the tax to?
Importation.
To the importation. Now, family, here's the question. They say it. Now here's the statement, family. Who is the only entity in this country, Brother Dixon, that can collect the tax?
The government.
Who?
The government.
The United States government is the only entity in this country that can collect the tax. Brother Dixon, they ratified this in 1788. Is that same government from 1788 still alive?
I'm paying taxes to it every month.
So the answer, family, if I was in courtroom, I'm gonna take that as a yes, Mr. Dixon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the United States government in 1788, that same government is alive today. We just established that there is not any other entity in this country that can collect a tax outside of the United States government. So that government in 1788 collected a tax. Now, let me put it to you this way. All of us know what it's like to go to the nightclub. This is the image. Uncle Sam was sitting at the end of the pier, and as the ship rolled in and everybody was coming into the club, Uncle Sam said, okay, that'll be $10. That'll be $10. That'll be $10. Uncle Sam collected that tax of every person. Now, some of you are going to say, and rightfully so, but Brother Mack, it said up to $10. So how do we know if it was 50 cents for this person, $1 for this person, $5.50 for this person, $2.35 for that person? I'm gonna tell you something, because slavery was such an abomination against humanity, as punitive damages, we're going to assign $10 for everybody. But that same government is alive today. So how do you calculate it? You go back to that same formula. F is equal to P times 1 plus I.
Bring it back up, David.
But what is P? So P is the present value. So all you got to do is through your research, and I don't have it. I didn't do it here, but I've gotten it. All you got to do is say how many blacks were imported into this country between 1788 and 1808. In that 20-year period, how many blacks were imported? However many it was, multiply times 10. Interest rate, add 6%. Now the N, see, that's going to be a bigger number. We're going to go from 1788 to 2021. Do the math on that, and it's what, 266 years or whatever it is, right? And then just run the numbers. That's my argument for reparations on both of those cases. And then finally, because we talked about what happened on April 16, 1862, when they started talking about what they can't do, I want two things you to remember. I want you to remember two things. I want you to remember what Brother Dixon told you about what we did during the pandemic of giving those stimulus checks out to everybody. I want you to remember that. And then I want you to remember what happened on April 16, 1862, when Lincoln and the Congress agreed to pay reparations to slave owners. See, America can do whatever she wants to do. So see, I need to be a part of that reparations argument. When they have those Senate subcommittees to review whether or not we want to pay reparations, and those congressmen are sitting up there talking about the Constitution, I want to remind them of what's in their Constitution. See, this is why they don't want you to think critically. This is what that critical race theory about. We need to shut Karl Mack up. Now imagine if all of us as a collective, and again, this ain't about me, it's about the power of history, family. And then when you think about reparations, I need you to understand this about reparations. Don't act like we would be the first people in the world to ever do it. I need you to go back to 1952. In 1952, Germany paid $58 billion by 1980 to survivors of the Jewish Holocaust. In 1976, Australia, 96,000 square miles of land to indigenous Aborigines. Now, it may seem like a lot of land until you start factoring in that the whole continent of Australia was theirs. Okay, but 1980, Canada paid $230 million to Japanese Canadians for World War II internments. And they gave them 673,000 square kilometers of land to the indigenous people. In 1988, the great United States of America gave $1 billion, $20,000 to each person of Japanese American descent for the internment during World War II. And they offered a formal apology. Now, I need you to understand how reparations works. See, this is a standard practice of international law. The United Nations negotiates it, and the International Court of Justice orders it. We need to take them to court, fam. we need to take them to court.
But you do know what they said. If we ever take anybody ever takes the United States to the international court, we'll invade them. So
But see, Brother Dixon,
you ain't everything you saying
right. But see, I want us to understand something, and let's tie Juneteenth and reparations together. See, the other thing that I understand, just like in the state of Washington, that Black representative, Melanie Morgan, yes, sister, I'm calling you out because I tried to talk to you behind closed doors and you was like, no, I don't need to talk to you. You're covered by the white press. Well, you know what? Now I'm with Brother Dixon. We at home, family. We done invited you to the family reunion and we're going to whoop your ass because, see, I tried to correct you and you want to hear it. Now, in King County.
Come get on the spades table. It's time to show up.
Right. In King County, in the state of Washington, I want you to understand this. Of all the counties in the United States, there's one county named after Martin Luther King Jr., and that's in Seattle, Washington. That's King County. King County has an executive director named Dow Constantine. And you want to talk about a joker who will play politics to get Black votes? That fool is the epitome of it. But he has a sister working for him, and I love the sister. But on this issue, her and I are crossways. She is his director of diversity and inclusion.
Oh, there it is.
I sat her down and I gave her this entire lesson on Juneteenth to show her how it was wrong. Her scared ass was too scared to go to the white man and tell him you got it wrong. She kept running me around in circles till finally I told her, you know what? I'm sick of these emails you fucking dismiss. I don't even want to talk to you no more. Her name is Anita Whitfield. Yes, see, family, you have to call names. And I'm going to tell you why you got to call names. Because if you don't,
that's right.
White folks think that these Black folks are still doing good and they keep elevating them and they become the gatekeepers. No,
yes,
we're going to bust your ass.
Yeah.
Melanie Morgan, we're going to bust your ass. Because if you can't get our history right, what makes me believe that you're going to work in my truest interest, that you got my true interest at heart? Anita Whitfield, Director of Diversity and Inclusion. Diversity and inclusion, and you don't have the moral fortitude to fight for the truth of my history? In Martin Luther King Jr. County? Get the fuck out of here. Yeah, we're calling you out. So yeah, I got issues with all of them like that, Brother Dixon. All of them. And this is why they don't want us to know our history.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love your after party, man. and listen, family, I want you to understand. I could have this conversation without my language. That shit's so pent up in me, and I just needed to get it out, man. I just needed to get it out. So
that's what I said. I said, let's take it to the after party. We want to make sure.
And I want you to take a look at this article. And this, again, this is why I so love, and this is why we have to support brothers like Brother Dixon, Roland Martin, and the Black press. See, I wrote an op-ed piece about the misrepresentation of Juneteenth. I sent it to the Washington Post, Seattle Times, all these papers. And I sent it to the Black press. My family in Seattle, the Seattle Medium and KRIZ, they were the only media outlet to pick it up. And when they released it on the wire, all Black papers around the country were picking it up. Not one white paper picked it up. Not one. See, they want us to make a mockery of our history. Again, it's simple to correct this because, see, Carter G. Woodson said this, and I don't want you to sit there and think, oh, he just complained about it, because I'm reminded of what Carter G. Woodson said in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro. He said this. He said, real education means to inspire people to live more abundantly, to begin with life as they find it, and then make it better. But the instructions thus far given most Negroes in colleges and universities has worked to the contrary. In many cases, it simply increases the number of malcontents who offer no solutions to the problems about which they complain. So you all have sat here and listened to me complain about the issue of Juneteenth. So, Carl, what is your resolution? It is simple. If your intent is to mark and commemorate the end of America's original sin, which is chattel slavery, do it on a day in which all of us were free. And that day is December 6th. If you want to commemorate Juneteenth, by all means, I'm supporting it. I'm going to Juneteenth celebrations. But trust and believe, if the speaker at that Juneteenth celebration gets up there and starts telling a fake history, a false narrative, I'm going to interrupt them. and say, family, look, I don't mean to rain on nobody's parade, but we're doing our ancestors a disservice. I need you to remember. And I would tell you this, fam. This is what I love about y'all. Most of us, when we found out that those 225,000 of our ancestors were still in bondage after June 19th, a lot of you have paused and thought differently about it. And that's all I'm asking you to do. Let us not forget them. We have to respect our history. And if we're going to complain when white folks get it wrong, we need to be just as diligent when we get it wrong. And again, Brother Dixon, this is what I love about you and Roland in the Seattle Medium and the Black press, is you allowing us to get it right. I love you for that, man.
Hey, Brother Mack, David, before he goes, just pull up one more time the March on Washington, so people can, because thank you for sharing this comparison for us to be able to understand exactly how many people were still in slavery after Juneteenth, all the way to December 6th.
There you go.
This is 250,000. This is 250,000 people.
That's right.
That we need to have the history right for. Dr. Carl Mack, I thank you for spending so much time with me today. It was an honor.
Bro, I promise you the honor was truly mine. And David, behind the scenes, man, thank you so much, man. I so appreciate what you all are trying to do and spreading this word and getting our truth out. And I'm going to tell you something, brother. I've been on a few shows, right? You made for what you do. You are absolutely made for this format. And I'm so proud of you, man. So proud.
Thank you. Thank you so much, man. That means a lot. Thank you for coming. The chat room was going crazy over the knowledge. Thank you for dropping that knowledge on us. Thank you for the conviction and the passion with which you're doing it. And again, I want to thank you in advance, because tomorrow night you're going to come with me over to TYT and we're going to tell it to an even bigger audience.
Hey, man, look, I'm going to tell you this. If we have to do it one person at a time, I'm down with that. Don't matter with me. So look, again, man, I'm so appreciative. And Brother Dixon, I want you to know, man, anytime that I can help, I ain't necessarily got to be on your show, but if you want to call me and get a historical perspective, man, you got my phone number. I am retired 24/7, 366 days.
All right, y'all heard him.
Now I also want to tell y'all this. I want to show you this.
Oh, yeah, the calendar thing.
Yeah. So now, in case you wonder, why did that brother, so this is what I did in my spare time. So I am, like I told you, I'm an engineer. So I decided to do, and what happened is I was at work and there was this white guy who came in and he was talking about Henry O. Flipper, who was the first Black to graduate from West Point. And as this white man is talking to me about Henry O. Flipper, he's looking at me like I know about Henry O. Flipper. I don't have a clue who he's talking about. And I just felt embarrassed that I didn't know anything about my history. So God placed on me on August 16th, 1990, this concept of doing a Black History calendar so that every day of the year, there could be somebody out of Black history. And so I wrote this calendar, and every day of the year, there's somebody from our history. Now, I want to just show you how up to date it was. So as I was putting this together and as things were changing, I was going right into it. So this is a day that many of us will say really impacted America, May 25th, 2020, because this is the day that George Floyd was murdered. So I put George Floyd in on the calendar. Then here's another historical date that was happening as we were putting the calendar together. This is August 11th. And so why do we have Sister Harris on August 11th? Because it was on this day in 2020 that Joe Biden announced his candidate for the vice presidency. The first
you got it up to date.
Yeah, up to date. And then, and as we was talking about Juneteenth, I want to just take you to this. Now, Brother Dixon, have you ever gone to church on New Year's Eve?
What kind of question is that? Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what they call that service?
Watch night.
They call it watch night. Now, most people don't know why they call it watch night. So because we've been talking about the Emancipation Proclamation, the reason they call it watch night is because our ancestors stayed up all night long waiting to hear the news that, yes, indeed, Abraham Lincoln had issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. Okay. Now, just so that we understand, even January 1st, I want you to get, and then there's like 4 pages of table of contents. So it's a lot of folks in here, right? But now I want you to remember this the next time, and I don't want to rain on your parade about New Year's Day, but in the lives of our ancestors, New Year's Day was the most dreaded day of the year. And I took this from the writings of some of our enslaved ancestors. The reason why they call this, and they call New Year's Day Heartbreak Day. The reason we called it Heartbreak Day is because on New Year's Day, the slave owners would take the enslaved to the auction block and they would auction us off. So they would separate parents from children. They would separate siblings from one another. And in the case of spouses, and when I say spouses, I'm saying this, I know that they didn't recognize the institution of marriage, but that's why we jumped the broom. We recognized it. So they would separate mothers and fathers from their children. Hearts were broken on that day. So that's why in the life of our enslaved ancestors, they call January 1st Heartbreak Day. And so the uniqueness of the calendar is just like I showed you what was on December 31st, what was on January 1st, what was on May 25th. Every day of the calendar is a on this day feature. So that's kind of why I just dibble and dabble.
Where can we get that?
So if you go to my website, and again, family, listen, I want to say this because this is not why I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to talk to you about educating you about our history. The calendar, you know, you buy it, great. You don't, it's okay with me. But if you want to get a copy of the calendar, go to blackheritagedays.com. All one word, blackheritagedays with an S.com. And the calendar is $20 or it's $19.99. It's free shipping. So I wanted to make it as inexpensive as I could. And so if you want a copy of the calendar, that's how you can get it now. Anyway, it's just been a labor of love. And it's not the first one I did. So that's Black Heritage Day 4. This is Black Heritage Day 3. There's a Black Heritage Day 2. There's a Black Heritage Day 1. And no, I don't have any more copies of any of those. So
okay,
that's kind of the fun of what I've done. And it's just been a labor of love to learn our history. But it's even better to help educate our people and talk about our experience with our family. So, Brother Dixon, again, man, I am so indebted to you, members of the Black Press, social media, radio, person, all of that, man. I'm just so indebted to you. Thank you so much.
No, the pleasure's mine. We're getting ready to get out of here. Thank you for all the time that you've given us. A couple of quick things before we go. We'll be already announced. We'll be on with TYT tomorrow night for their Juneteenth special. We're going to be taking the truth to as many people as possible. Also tomorrow night we're having the patron party. All of you patrons, if you want to be there, the link will be there. Dr. Mack, you're free. You're more than welcome to come. But we get into ungodly hours. We get to like 2-3 o'clock in the morning sometimes, but you're more than welcome to come. And then last but not least, our DJ exclusive. He wasn't here today, but he wanted me to let you all know he had to go to the urgent care to get checked out. But he thinks everything is so far so good, but he wanted you all to know where he was and what's going on. So he's in our thoughts and prayers and sending good energy and all that stuff to him. That's it. Dr. Mack, we want to have you back anytime that you can come back. And
Bam, I'm always here for you. Believe it, know and believe that.
Yes, sir. And you know what? You may not be a historian, but you are our historian. So we thank you for that. David, take us out of here. We'll see everyone next time.
Set the potato, sunlight that always stays, dinner by the waterway. It's that sweet life. Raise your cross. Made some dude crack a smile. He asked if I could stay a while. I'm living that high life. Time to catch a flight, but you can make me go. Unlocking all the memories of my new home. Ventilated echoes playing to and fro. To and fro, back and forth, yeah. Cuts some kids dancing in the alleyway. Crazy how the melodies began to play, yeah. Tell me how you feeling when you hear the lyric, yeah. My heart's in Stockholm. Now I never wanna go home. I left my heart in Stockholm. Now I never wanna go home. Shopping the girl, I brought a girl on my Vespa. She said I already told ya, yeah, yeah. I never dated a black guy. I said you're brown yourself. Let me offer help. Come on inside, where everybody knows your name, everybody knows your name. Time to catch a flight, but you can make me go. Unlocking all the memories of my new home. Ventilated echoes playing to and fro, back and forth, yeah. Caught some kids dancing in the alleyway. Crazy how the melodies began to play, yeah.